Our guy Mike Garafolo, this transition. You grew up on the East Coast. Mike, have you ever had a Necco wafer?
I've heard of them. No, I've never. I don't think I've ever had one. Let me look at it. Let me look them up.
All right.
You like those shoes, by the way? You like those?
Are you buying? Are you buying shoes? You're shopping.
Well, you were going on about the wafers, so
we had a huge wafer item that we needed to resolve here.
I've seen them, but I haven't had them. You're telling me they don't taste like anything? They look like they're sugary, just like the Smarties.
No, they kind of have it's like the outer texture. It's almost like they've covered up whatever taste they're supposed to have with just kind of an amorphous, tasteless powder of some kind. You kind of get into them. They crunch a little bit. We'll cover the wafers. We'll get back to the wafers momentarily. Mike, you were out here in Los Angeles for NFL Network's coverage of the 2024 NFL Draft. You wore some very loud suits. Enjoyed talking to you from my spot in Detroit. You're based out there. You spend a lot of time. You cover the whole league. You spend a lot of time in that market. You're around the Giants, the Jets. Start out with the Giants here. Everyone in the world wanted to give them a quarterback, whether they were traded up to 3, whether they were taking one at 6. They end up standing pat if they can't get up to number 3. They take Malik Neighbors. Give me the state of the Giants and why not taking a quarterback in this draft made sense.
Well, they did. I mean, we knew. Go back to the Combine when we were doing the insiders from Lucas Oil Stadium. And which one of you? You asked me, I think, Tom, what's the percentage chance that the Giants take a quarterback?
And then we tweeted it.
Very specific. And I was like, okay, 78.6%. Like I pulled a number out of thin air, right? Just to be funny. And it was like, yeah, the NFL Network tweeted it. All the Giants blogs were like, he says it's 78.7. Like, what would lead you to believe that was the
pretty
number
high percentage,
that was
Mike.
actually mathematically legitimate? So, but at the time we talked about it, you tell me, are one of those teams at 2 and 3 willing to move? Which back then, if you had asked me, and I think I even said it on the show, I'd be shocked if 2 and 3 stayed put. If one of those two teams didn't trade out, which they wound up not trading out. That was the most surprising thing to me. And if you had told me back then those teams aren't moving, I would say, yeah, then it's unlikely the Giants take a quarterback, because are you going to take the 4th ranked quarterback at that spot once you finally get to 6? So that's kind of where it was for them. And they did make their effort to get up and get Drake May, but 2 wasn't moving, and which would have been an in-division move, which would have been unheard of for a quarterback at that spot. We've seen trades within the division elsewhere, but just to see it happen at that top of the draft would have been unprecedented. So, yeah, I mean, they tried their best. At that point, you take a receiver to help Daniel Jones. I know they went into this draft process saying, all right, if we can land a guy who we think is going to be a franchise-changing quarterback, we're going to land that guy. If not, we're going to try to surround Daniel Jones, who they have had confidence in, that his rehab will be on track and is on track and will be set for week 1 of the NFL season, at which point he will be the starter. Drew Lock is there, and Drew Lock they have confidence in, and they certainly made a strong move to bring him in as a free agent. During the rehab process, Drew Lock's going to push Daniel Jones, and who knows, after week 1, if Daniel Jones is not playing well, that's up to Daniel Jones, basically. But at this point, they feel like they're confident in him, and they've got a potential game-breaking presence in Malik Neighbors. They have not had that since Odell. I know the comparisons are there because of the LSU thing, but this is the kind of piece that they need to get to the point where we thought maybe Darren Waller was going to be the element that was going to open up this offense and lead him to be something you got to worry about. Instead, week 1, they come out and they're more conservative than they were the year before, which I still don't quite understand how we got to that point. So this is the state of the Giants. Is Malik Neighbors needs to be the guy that unlocks Daniel Jones and unlocks this offense right now.
We had Jarvis Landry on the show yesterday, former LSU Tiger like Malik Neighbors. I had him give his Mount Rushmore of LSU receivers. He put Malik Neighbors on that list. And he was calling back to Dwayne Bowe and guys from yesteryear. And he said, based on not just what he sees, but the sources that he still has in Baton Rouge, he said, this guy is going to be legit. The question really is about Daniel Jones. And you're there, Mike. I'm sure just you run into Giants fans. You've got family members, friends, whatever. Like, what's the environment around Daniel Jones? In other words, are we going to get into training camp and this is going to be nonstop? When is Daniel Jones going to be out of the lineup? Or are people, listen, they're pot committed for $35 million this year. Are people willing to give this a chance with Daniel Jones?
I believe that most Giants fans, just gauging the reaction leading up to the draft, most Giants fans wanted Neighbors, which leads to them showing some confidence in Daniel Jones. They haven't seen the full Daniel Jones since he's been here. I mean, John Mara said it himself best when they hired Brian Dable, or was it Joe Shane? It was one of those press conferences. John Mara spoke to the side and said, "We've done everything we possibly can to screw this guy up. Changing head coaches, changing offensive coordinators, haven't had an offensive line, haven't had weapons around him." So we're still at that point with Daniel Jones. Add the ACL recovery on top of that, and you still have a huge question at the quarterback position that needs to be answered by him playing well and by him coming out and showing that he could be the guy that if you need him to throw 40 to 45 times a game, if you need him to throw for 4,000 yards on a year, that he can be that guy. If you need him to come back at the end of the game and lead you to a comeback victory and throw you to a win, like we saw in his first action when he played the Tampa Bay Buccaneers years ago and he led a comeback victory, and you're like, oh, okay, cool. This is why they picked him 6th overall. He's sort of Eli Jr. Doesn't look like he has a pulse, and then all of a sudden at the key point in the game, he's making the plays that you need him to make to win the game. That's what we need to see. Now you've got Malik Neighbors added to it. You've got them pretty much doubling down. And because this is not the regime that drafted him. That was the other thing. It was like, okay, well, when it's not the regime that drafts you, you come in, it's a quarterback that hasn't blown you away. They can't wait to get their next guy. This would have been the opening for the Giants and the new regime to do that. They did not do that. They had the chance to take J.J. McCarthy, Michael Penix, even Bo Nix if they wanted to. They would have interest in those quarterbacks later in the draft. They didn't have them rated that high. They said, you know what, we're going to ride with Daniel Jones, and they are.
On the Jets side of things here, and of course last year there was so much high hopes. Giants had won a playoff game. They had added Darren Waller, added all these pieces. Everything there kind of goes sideways early. Saquon gets hurt. Line's banged up. The Jets lose their quarterback on national TV after 4 snaps. Aaron Rodgers is back. This feels like 2024 is, more or less the redo of 2023. There have been some changes on that team. There was a lot of surprise, I think, at least among fans and certain media members, that the Jets go Olu Fashanu, not Brock Bowers, with their first-round pick after doing the swap, moving down to 11 with the Minnesota Vikings here. What in your mind, and based on the people you've talked to, was that pick for the Jets all about? Why did they decide adding another offensive lineman in the same offseason where you added John Simpson and you added Tyron Smith? Why was this the right move?
I was confident in very little going into this draft. The one thing I was confident in was that the Jets were not going to take Brock Bowers. Part of that was what we had kind of heard behind the scenes. The other part was that Joe Douglas at his pre-draft press conference called him a Swiss Army knife and talked about what a value he was to an offense. That was a dead giveaway that we are not eyeing up that guy. Because if they were, they wouldn't have said anything remotely near what Joe Douglas said about him. So they brought in, a couple of tackles here, but a couple of guys that are on the back end of their career with injury issues that haven't played full seasons. Morgan Moses has played through some stuff. I don't want to make it seem like he's not willing to play through injuries. He has done that in the last couple of years, but he had that pec issue last year. He had a core muscle injury a couple of years ago. So those are reliable guys if they're healthy. But even if they are healthy, you're not getting them for the long haul. And Joe Douglas continues to try to build up that offensive line. So, yeah, that made sense to me. I thought the Jets all the way were going offensive line. Maybe if some target slipped down. By target, I mean wide receiver. I shouldn't say target. Wide receiver had slipped down there. Then maybe that would have been a temptation for them, but not a surprise to me that they go offensive line there. The Malachi Corley pick, which those texts that they showed, the Jets tweeted out of Joe Douglas and Robert Saleh going back and forth, and the Malachi Corley, no matter what, the reference to draft day, apparently real text. Like I saw that, and I was like, oh, okay, that's the Jets social media having fun. Like, no, those are real screenshots of the two of those guys back to back saying that is the guy they wanted. He had a terrific Senior Bowl. He won the wide receiver of the week, if I'm not mistaken, for whichever team that he was playing for, voted on by the defensive backs, right, which to me is the utmost sign of respect. So he had a good pre-draft run-up. He's been compared somewhat to Deebo Samuel. He seems like a weapon in that regard. So, should be fun. Let's see this Jets offense for more than, 4 plays.
the video the Jets put out of everybody getting on the phone with Malachi Corley, and one after another, Joe Douglas, Robert Saleh, Nathaniel Hackett, they all say, hey, come here and keep playing angry. We want to see that anger come out on the field. You mentioned Debo. Yeah. He doesn't physically look like Debo. Like, he's not as big and as jacked of a guy. But you watch his play style, the highlights. I mean, he initiates contact out here, and Robert Saleh, of course, was with Debo in San Francisco. It makes sense that they think add a tone setter to that room. They kind of hoped Allen Lazard would be that guy. That's why they paid him, besides the fact that he was friends with Aaron Rodgers. But in Green Bay, that was the guy who would dig out a safety, and he was the big, the physical guy. By midseason, he's a healthy scratch because he's not doing those things. Bring in Malachi Corley to maybe push some things forward here. And I imagine that if you're thinking about where the Jets are going to throw the football this season, Mike, you have more options than you did a year ago, presuming that Mike Williams' rehab stays on track here.
Yeah, Robert Saleh. Hold on. What is this? Hold on.
You about to break news here, or did you lose the shoes that were in your shopping cart?
No, Will Harris, former Lions defensive back, signing with New Orleans on a one-year deal.
We could have waited on that one, Mike, but go on.
I saw the alert come through, and I had to go chase
BC
it down.
Guy.
Yeah, there you go. See? You just knocked your own guy.
Okay, just go on.
Go back to Malachi Corley. Yeah. Was it Robert Saleh? That's what I was looking up when that text came through. I think it was Saleh that said if he has if there's a relative of his on the goal line and he's trying to get into the end zone, he's going to take out that relative to get there, which is about as much of a compliment as you can get for a guy's physical style and desire to get into the end zone to make that happen. Now he's calling me. This is very important to him that he is calling me. Let me text him right now. You ask the next question. Go ahead.
Mike Garafolo, NFL Media Insider, is our guest. Your guy Howie has two of the top corners. Both fall into his lap in rounds 1 and round 2. Then it seems like the Eagles did not and taking a photo there. The Eagles did not seem to have high regard for the rest of the draft, Mike, because it was one trade out, one trade down after another. I believe they got extra 3rd, 4th, and 5th round picks in next year's draft. Take me through what the philosophy was in an offseason where, for everything the Eagles did and being, 10-1 at one point last season, they don't finish well. Both coordinators gone, major changes on the roster, sign Saquon, sign Bryce Huff. Now, going to the draft, make over your secondary. What's been the guiding philosophy, and what do the Eagles realistically expect they've got for 2024?
It's funny you mentioned that. As I meant to double check this because there was so much stuff flying on Saturday. Did the Eagles did they trade the 4th round pick to the Lions for DeAndre Swift and then get a 4th round pick back? I think that's because it was a 2024 4th round pick to the Lions, and then I think they got the 4th round pick back next year. So I think that's what happened. So that's kind of a fun little twist to that whole thing. I mean, there was a mix of Howie Roseman saying that we can accumulate capital for next year. He does about he does the best job, I think, of any general manager of addressing now and keeping tomorrow alive as I've ever seen. And I go back to a couple of years ago when they had a rebuilding year and they made the playoffs, right? If I'm not mistaken, that year as they're rebuilding, which was pretty incredible. And they kept stockpiling those 1st round picks. And then they kicked it a year out when Jalen Hurts showed that, okay, he's got a little something, but we're still going to keep that 1st round pick in case we need a quarterback. And they wound up being able to use that capital on other positions of the roster because Hurts kept playing above expectations, I would say. So, I think he did a good job of that, building up for next year. Their first 2 picks, it reminded me of, was it the 2002 draft? They took Lito Shepherd, Sheldon Brown, and Michael Lewis in the first 2 rounds, where they said, we need a secondary reset here. And Troy Vincent and Bobby Taylor were their cornerbacks, and one or both may have still been around at the time, kind of like it is now, where you've got Darius Slay and James Bradbury, but saying, hey, these are the cornerbacks that we're going to take over. Going forward. I thought their first 2 picks were outstanding with Cooper DeJean and Quinyon Mitchell. The Quinyon Mitchell one, I just talked to a personnel guy the other day who said, boy, they got to be blown away with that pick right there. Like that's a home run pick. That kid was nails in the pre-draft process from the Senior Bowl through everything he did. And he seems like he's just incredible competitor. The kind of guy that you want in your locker room and on your roster, especially at a position like that. He's mentally tough. He's a little bit of everything. And I said, why didn't you guys take him? Because it was one of the picks before the Eagles had taken, let's say in the previous 10, we'll call it. Says, well, no, we're happy with what we did at our spot. But that was one of those where it was like, pretty tempting. That guy's still on the board. And we couldn't believe he lasted as long as he did to the Eagles there at 22. So that I thought was a home run. That was just who was it? It was one of the people I was working with on the show. Was it Bucky Brooks or maybe it was Steve Weish leading up, who said, Howie Roseman just poops out 4-leaf clovers from time to time. And I was like, yeah, there it is right there.
Mike,
I'd love to give credit to whoever gave me that quote. I can't remember who it was.
You were clearly very engaged. There was a lot flying over draft weekend. Last thing for you, Mike, we've talked about, the shock of the Falcons picking Michael Penix at number 8. That was the shock, too, I think, virtually everybody within the league. What else, if anything, stands out to you, whether it was a surprise, something you're still trying to figure out, a pick, a trade that didn't happen? What's another takeaway that you've had non-Falcons related?
It was the whole top 10 that there was no movement. I mean, we thought so. We talked earlier about 2 and 3, but we thought Chargers want to get out, the Cardinals want to get out. By the time we got to the 6th pick or so, I got a call from a GM as we take a look at the top 10 here. Don't worry, Tom, I'll host. I think it was the 6th or 7th pick. By the time we got to that, the GM calls me. He's like, "Are you surprised that nobody's moving?" And I was like, "Well, are you trying to move? Because if you're trying to move, you called the wrong person." He's like, "No. I thought there was going to be all this movement in the top 10." And actually, go back to the Eagles. They had made so many calls leading up to the draft to kind of gauge, all right, what's it going to take to kind of get up, if it's got to be into the teens or maybe even around 10 or whatever it was going to wind up being. The Eagles got to the point where there were so many offensive players that were being drafted and there was so little movement up top that they were like, we don't have to move. We can just sit here at 22 and we can take who we want to take. So it was kind of, as it was going on, affecting the teams that were behind the top 10 that thought there was going to be all this movement and had a game plan going in. So I think those teams are happy with what slid to them. Certainly if they were looking for defensive guys, you saw Chris Ballard's reaction to be on the Colts internal video where they showed his reaction to getting Latu at number 15 overall. So I think a lot of those teams, if they were looking for defensive help or help other than what was being taken, which certainly was quarterbacks up top, I think they were happy with how it fell, but surprised that it wasn't as much action.
Mike, thank you very much. Get back to the shoe shopping, the Will Harris tweet, and the DJ set that I assume you're doing with those headphones on there.
Yeah. No, I'm actually, working for NFL Network today. That's something that
this is work, man. This is work.
Oh, you're not on later. No, I'm working both shows today.
Yeah, I got to fly back. All right. Thank you very much. Mike Garafolo.
Have a great show, Tom.
NFL Media Insider, DJ, fashionista. DJ fills a lot of roles for NFL Network. Coming up after this. Thanks, Mike. We can get him off the screen now.
Catch the Rich Eisen Show every single day on the Roku channel, 12 to 3 Eastern, for free.